All right, good evening, everybody. This is Councilor Todd Kovas here, and this is the ninth of our Attleboro COVID-19 updates. This week we have a pretty packed agenda. We're joined by Congressman Joe Kennedy. Congressman Kennedy, welcome. Additionally, we'll hear from Superintendent Dave Sawyer, State Senator Paul Feeney, State Rep Jim Hawkins, the Attleboro Health Department. We have Alan Perry, Dr. Quinn, and Nurse O'Brien joining us from the Attleboro Health Department, as well as we have the Attleboro Economic Development Director, Catherine Fierick, and Madeline McNeely from the Council on Aging. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining. This is wonderful, and we'll get right to it. Congressman Kennedy, good to see you again today.
Hey, my friend. I'm doing great, thank you. How are you?
Outstanding. A little sunburned.
Yeah, exactly. Finally, right? Finally.
Exactly. So how are things going at the federal level, and what's been going on?
So, look, I think to cut to it, the federal level, I think, has been a challenge all the way through this. I'd say, however, if you look at Congress, for as divided as a nation as we are politically, Congress actually has come together in an extraordinary short period of time by congressional standards and authorized the largest economic rescue package in American history by far. And so I understand that we've gotten an awful lot of calls from individuals that are still waiting for their $1,200 checks from small businesses that are still struggling to get through the PPP program and receive the funding that they have applied for and that they need. And we have to do a better job at that. We have to get that money through. There's been a number of challenges with it. But as a whole, seeing Congress come together as quickly as it did, I think has been needed and necessary and urgent. But overall, given how difficult circumstances were, has been pretty impressive. That being said, an awful lot more needs to be done. And this is, Todd, where I think we really need to focus on. There's not enough money there still for small businesses. Individuals are still scraping by, and we're still potentially on the earlier end of this when we think of how long it's going to take us to go back to normal. Like that definition, I think, is a evolving definition, but we're not going to go back to the way life was in January in the coming weeks. That's still, I think, a long way away. And so trying to make sure that families have the support that they need to get through this is going to be critical. And then, as we even alluded to a little bit earlier when I was down with you at the drive-through, assistance for state and municipal governments is going to be absolutely critical, right? Initial revenue projections here indicate that Massachusetts will face about a 10 to 13% shortfall. And that's just from essentially April through June. That projections for the following year, and Jim and Paul Feeney can kind of throw some more details on this, but I've seen estimates up to 25 or even 30% shortfall. That's devastating, particularly when you think that 40% of our state budget is healthcare, and you can't really cut that in the midst of a pandemic. So everything else, from first responders to teachers to basic infrastructure, where's that going to come from? And we've seen Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell already say that they're going to wage a huge fight over this. That's not helpful. That's not constructive, and that obviously needs to change. And that's going to be a big part of this next package is aid to aid to state and local governments. One, additional support for small businesses and healthcare sector individuals. And then trying to start to turn the page as to what we need to do in order to actually get to a recovery.
That was my biggest question as we're thinking about, it's budget season in the city, is looking at what the federal government might be doing to help subsidize some of these communities as we see this shortfall and are thinking about the next school year and all of that. So that's
Todd. The only thing that I'd say to that, and it would be really helpful, is I know you've got Representative Hawkins and, as you said, Senator Feeney on the call too, or on the Zoom too. Raise your voices over this, right? I need the help to be able to paint the picture, although most of I think my colleagues on both sides of the aisle already know this, but when you hear Mitch McConnell say, hey, we're not going to bail out states, or some senators say, we're done doing rescue packages for a while. Let's paint that picture as to what that actually means. When you look at states that are facing the 10, 15% shortfalls just by June 30th, some might have a rainy day fund that can meet it. Ours, if you use every single dollar, we might come close. I'll leave that to the state legislators here to kind of fill that in. But next year is going to be worse by any stretch. CBO, Todd, is projecting, the Congressional Budget Office is projecting unemployment to last in the tens, right? So 10+% to last well into 2021. Right? The idea that somehow we're going to flip a switch and get back to where we were at 3% unemployment in January, I think is not all that likely. And if that's the case, fleshing out what exactly this is going to mean for community members and how they're somehow going to make ends meet is critically important. And the federal government has the ability to come in here and be a backstop. We need it to be. And we're going to need, I think my colleagues are going to need a big push there. So we need your help.
That all makes sense, and I'll try to get the word out. And thank you for joining here. My other question is, with the previous stimulus bill, there's been a lot of talk about supporting small businesses and them being able to apply for these loans. Is there more coming? I feel like the rollout has been a little bit rocky. Is there anything you can?
A little bit rocky is,
to put it mildly.
Yes, to put it mildly. So let me put it this way. I'm not going to defend the rollout here at all, right? I think we even talked a little bit about this before, but for folks that had talked to me about it before, there's one thing to acknowledge the fact that small businesses were going to be in dire need. And then to say, hey, we're going to give them a bunch of money, $350 billion in the first package and about $360 or so billion in the second package. It's another thing to say, hey, how are we going to get that money out so small businesses can use it? And let me be clear about this, there's no good way to do it. And so I've done a number of forums with folks from the SBA office, regional SBA office in Massachusetts. They have a staff of 11. They did 47,000 loans, or 47,000 initiatives, projects that they approved last month. That was as much as more than they had done, in the prior 10 years combined, right? 10 years combined, they did in a month. So you are 100% right, it's rocky. The part of the reason why it's rocky is there was no system set up to do this. And they didn't have time to set up a system to do this. And that comes back to some of the lessons that need to be learned about, is there a better way of doing this so that and hope to God we don't have to go through this again. But clearly the current systems that we had were not functional to meet this need, right? And when you're going through that level of volume and that level of need, you're gonna have either abuses or mistakes and missteps. We've heard from small business owners that were approved for funding, but not for the funding that they applied for because of clerical errors. We've heard of folks that still have yet to get approval. You've heard obviously of the folks that have used some of those businesses that are, one, public companies, two, businesses that are paying their CEOs millions of dollars that essentially recoup those $1 million salaries by your and my taxpayer dollars. Some companies that took this money and returned it to their shareholders as a dividend. I mean, the abuses about this are not insignificant. And the lessons here have to be learned so that we don't do it again. But we also have to acknowledge that there's still a lot of small businesses that still need help. And we got to get another round of funding, I think, out to them to make sure that they're able to make ends meet. That's the whole point on this project.
And I certainly recognize that, as rocky as it may have been, it's unprecedented. And the fact that you guys were able to move as quickly as you did isn't insignificant in and of itself. So thank you for that.
Let me just, again, all of that is true, and I appreciate that. Congress doesn't deserve a cookie for doing its job, and it certainly doesn't deserve to get a huge slap on the back for doing its job in the midst of a national catastrophe where people turn to the federal government to say, hey, we need you, put aside partisan differences. And so we were able to do a bit of that. There's another round of this that's I think going to get harder, but we still need to find ways to make the system work.
Perfect. So those were my questions. Do other people have questions for the congressman? All right.
I did. It's not a question. I had a comment. I wanted to thank you, Congressman, for coming down and helping out with our food drive. And I can't help but noticing that you brought an SUV full of bags of food. And when you got those unloaded, you went and helped us unload food from all the cars from people coming in. So thank you. We appreciate your support.
You guys are going to do this. And to see the way that the community of Attleboro stepped up is certainly not a surprise, but an awful lot of faces on the Zoom call that were there. And Todd, a huge thank you to you for pulling everybody together and for inviting me to come down and do it. And obviously for having me on tonight.
Yeah, I hope it was a bipartisan group there, and hopefully you saw some of the camaraderie as we serenaded Representative Hawkins and all that. It's been wonderful to see sort of the community come together, and it's great to live here in Attleboro.
Absolutely.
Well, so I understand that you're incredibly busy, so if you need to jump off, I won't at all be offended. Thank you so much for joining.
Some more phone calls I have to get to, but I'm grateful for the opportunity, guys, and keep in touch. All right. Thank you. Todd, good to see you. Representative, Senator, everybody else, be well.
All right. Next up, we have Attleboro Public School Superintendent Dave Sawyer. Welcome, Dave.
Thank you for having me, Todd.
Awesome. And so I had a couple questions, but before we get started, do you have general topics to share as far as how's everything going with the schools now that we're closed through the end of the year?
Well, I mean, all things considered, I think we're doing pretty well. I can't say enough about how committed our staff have been and how they've been persevering through some really difficult circumstances. And I know that it's been very hard on families as well, and they've been very, very patient. And everyone's really trying their best. I should also, while they're here, thank our legislative delegation for all their support. A lot of things have been going on that wouldn't be possible without their help. So very, very lucky that we've all been able to pull together and serve the needs of our kids as best we can.
That's great. So a couple questions I had. One was about grading for the third trimester. I saw your video on AACS, but I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about what this third trimester grading is going to look like.
Sure. So in accordance with the guidance we received from the state, the entire district in Attleboro is not producing a grade for the third trimester. So, from K to 12, basically we're going to be giving students a credit for their participation in our activities. And then at the high school level, there is, a credit or non-credit distinction that does have to be made for students who did or didn't do what was, asked of them through remote learning. But that's, a different grade than pass-fail. I mean, pass-fail has a connotation. We do not, we agree with the state that we cannot accurately assess or fairly assess work to create a grade that's comparable to what will be on people's transcripts from before and after. So that's why we have to keep with the sort of generic C for, for credit, or, in some ways we might look back and see that C as a C for COVID.
Okay. And then one of the other items, so I know my kids have been running out of motivation, and I feel like are you seeing that as something common across the board, where now that we're 2 months into this, the motivation level is starting to decline, the novelty of this whole thing is starting to wear off? First of all, is that common, or is that just the Kobus household?
I would say it's not uncommon, but we did a survey of families back in April, and not surprisingly, we got back a wide range of views on how things were going. There were as many people who said that there wasn't enough work and that we needed to send more, that their kids were hungry for more work. There was many of those parents who said, as there were parents who said, I'm completely overwhelmed. This is way too much. Please, you've got to cut back. And so I think that really reflects that, we have a whole range of realities in homes. I mean, one of the reasons why we do school is because in school we can create a more even playing field and try to put kids all in the same position to access their learning. And at home it's very, very different. Everybody's dealing with different things, and so as a result of that, I think we are seeing quite a range in how people are feeling about it. That being said, yeah, I think it's definitely true that the novelty has worn off. And that's why we've really tried to make a push for the month of May to be a productive one. We're very concerned about learning loss. There's plenty of research that says that when you have a significant break like we have every summer, there is measurable loss. And for our students, they will have been out of school since March 13th, and so a break of that length is pretty significant. So we see May as our last stand to try to buttress the work that we did this year and to really reinforce our efforts so that we put ourselves in as best position as we can for when we return. But that being said, we have to make some shifts here, and we've really narrowed our focus on what the state is referring to as power standards. So we're trying to get lean and mean and really focus on what matters. And at the same time, we're messaging to both families and staff that
can you say that again? I didn't understand. What was the power standard?
The power standard. So, the curriculum that we deliver in Attleboro is based off the state's frameworks, which are a list of standards that we have to meet. And they're pretty extensive. And one of the ways that the state's provided guidance for us is that they've narrowed in on the ones that they're calling power standards, the standards that are the most significant ones that pay the greatest dividend, that have the greatest crossover to other standards. And so we've really focused our efforts on those particular standards.
Okay.
But that being said, we're also messaging to both staff and families that, in these circumstances, we have to prioritize engagement over academics and mental health over achievement, right? We have to ensure that everybody's well. And, if it's too easy to disconnect, when the kids come to school, we have them, they're trapped with us. We can, use our skills to, gain their attention and help them to get on task. At home, if they don't bother to log in, there's nothing we can do to make them to do so. So it's a much more daunting task to ensure that kids are doing what we need to do. So we have to make sure that that they're healthy, that they're engaged, that they're interested in what they're doing. And so we're really, trying to shift on that. And I've been very consistent in my messaging to everybody that because of the circumstances are all varied at home, parents have to make good decisions about what's important to them. And what they think they need to do to make things work. And so if people need to cut back or to focus on certain things, or this assignment works for me, but this one doesn't, those are the decisions people have to make, and we have to be supportive of that. All we ask is that there's good two-way communication between families and the teachers. And then if that's the case, then there'll be no judgment.
Perfect. And then my last question for you was, I know it's early on, but do you have any thoughts about what school reopening is going to look like? And I know there's a lot of guidance from the state that'll need to come down, but have you thought about that? Or
obviously? Yeah, we're very busy thinking about it, although we don't want to get too ahead of our skis here. We want to wait and get those that guidance from the state from their perspective. One of the big things is we're waiting to hear when schools will actually be open. So we know they're closed through the 30th of June, but it's not clear whether or not they'll be open for the summer or not. And given how much planning goes into it, we've already started to move towards remote learning for our summer programs, because the kind of planning that it takes to pull off those programs, we can't really wait to find out whether or not we're going to be able to do more traditional schooling during the summer, and under what that sort of guidance would look like. But that being said, we do know that we're going to get to go back at some point. We're very hopeful that it will be with the normal start of school, and we're pretty confident that it's not going to be school like it's always been. We're pretty sure that we're going to be asked to do social distancing, and that means that we can't have the entire student body in the building at the same time. Most specifically because you can't have them all that many kids in the halls. You can't have that many kids in a classroom. So a lot of districts are talking about the idea that we're going to have to split them up. And so there are a lot of ways to do that. There's, double sessions. There's splitting the classroom into A and B days. You can go week on, week off. There are a lot of options. We're not sure what kind of flexibility we're going to be given by the state to do that, but we do believe that we're going to be having school in some sort of modified way that allows us to keep students, socially distant while in the learning environment. So a lot to work through on what that exactly looks like, and hoping that the state will help us to make good decisions about that.
Interesting. All right. And so I know we had talked about potentially saying happy birthday to everybody with birthdays in May, but I understand your birthday is in May. So happy birthday, Superintendent Sawyer. So that's all I have for questions. Does anybody else have questions for Superintendent Sawyer? I believe there's one question online about the Bulls documentary from Dave Murphy, but I think he's just saying hi. Thank you so much for joining us. I definitely appreciate it, and appreciate the work you're doing and all of that.
Well, I appreciate that, and happy to be here. Happy to come back anytime.
Thank you so much. All right, and if you need to jump off, obviously feel free. Next up, we have State Senator Paul Feeney. Paul, I spent all weekend with you. You don't look half as sunburned as I do.
I can see that you have the mask suntan on the
Wonderful,
face.
right?
The sign of the times. We're getting used to that. Thank you, Todd. Thank you again for doing this. I know we're over 2 months now into doing this, and didn't know that it was gonna be like this every single week, and that we're gonna have to do what we've been doing. But certainly getting the information out to the public is paramount in any crisis like this. And there are certain people that really step up to lead, and you've been one of them in the city of Attleboro. So thank you for everything you've been doing, and really a big shout out to AACS and Jim Jones and folks that have been bringing this forum to the public every single week, and who have been spreading the word. And then to the others on the call. I mean, as a legislator, one of the things that we have to do is kind of play traffic cop and be a jack of all trades, and really triage situations from all different angles and sectors. But the people on the ground that are doing the work every day, I see Madeline here from the Council on Aging, the work that she has to do in incredibly challenging circumstances on a normal basis. And then, in a pandemic like this, where the most affected are seniors, both from a health perspective and now from an economic perspective. There's a lot of challenges ahead, and I just want to thank Madeline for the work that she's doing. And of course, our health agents and the folks on the ground that are working on this every single day in the city of Attleboro, and dealing with it really on a micro level to make sure that the city is doing everything that we can do to protect our citizens and deal with the public health crisis. So thank you to them as well. And to Catherine Fierick, City of Attleboro is lucky to have somebody who's looking out for the economic interests of the city at all times anyways, but now with the real challenging path in front of her as we start to kind of re-enter into our economy and make sure that we have midterm and long-term actions that we need to take so that we can recover our economy in Attleboro. So thank you to everybody for doing this. I'm real quick tonight. There's only a couple of things I wanted to bring up. One, Todd, you and I have been talking ad nauseum for the last couple months here on the data. There are folks over at DPH that dig into the data, that release that information every day. You've done some incredible analysis on a city level and on a county level. And we've been talking each week about what that data means, what those charts mean. And obviously, day one, we said that and it became rather cliche, but, the flattening of the curve, that was the whole point of all these mitigation efforts, was to make sure that we didn't get into a situation where our hospitals and our healthcare system was overwhelmed, that they had enough resources to keep up with the demand. We've gotten there. We talked about a little bit last week where we got to that spike, Probably about 10 or 11 days ago, we saw a spike in cases and hospitalizations. Since then, we've definitely plateaued a little bit, which is a good sign. The last couple of days, we've seen some promising signs. We haven't seen a sharp decline, but the models never suggested that we would. So right now we're in that plateau phase, but the good part of that is that our hospitals are able to handle not only the COVID-19 cases, but everything else that they have to deal with on a daily basis anyways. So we're at that point, but I just want to caution people, and you know, I've done it here now for a few weeks running, that the reason why we weren't overwhelmed, the reason why our hospitals weren't overwhelmed is twofold. One, because here in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, we actually had a plan where we came together in a bipartisan way and figured out how we could make sure that our hospitals and the staff and our nurses that do incredible work actually have the resources. We certainly were not perfect. And, you know, in speaking with nurses over the last couple of weeks, it's a scary thought with some of the things that they have to deal with without the proper protective equipment. We need to fix that. But the second piece to this is that people actually came together and did what they were asked to do, which was to stay at home as much as possible, to not go to work remotely, to not go to stores, to not, you know, go out and try and come together with folks that live outside the household. So that's the reason why those mitigation efforts, we've seen the positive effect of that. So it's not that we've gotten to a point where the virus has disappeared or it's any less of a threat. The virus is still a threat. Spread in our community is still a threat. So as we think about trying to reopen and get back into some semblance of normalcy, which again will change for a long time to come, we have to be cognizant of the fact that, you know, the virus didn't go away. We still have to maintain social distancing as much as possible. We still need to stay at home as much as possible. We still need to wear masks when we're out in public. So a couple of big items from this week, even as we're starting to see the plateau, the governor and the administration, which have done a great job really in monitoring this and acting each day to make sure that we're doing the right thing. The governor came out with a couple of reports this week. Number one, the stay-at-home advisory was extended until May 18th. Businesses, non-essential businesses, are still closed at least until May 18th. But the second piece of that is he's put together a reopening advisory board. And really the charge of that board is to figure out, how do we reopen in a smart way that doesn't just flip a switch and then, you know, let everybody loose and then we're right back where we started. The idea is that we have a board that comes together that meets with different sectors and business groups and nonprofits and educators to really come up with a comprehensive plan about how we slowly start to phase in a reopening so that we don't end up with a spike in cases. So that board is meeting every single day. They have been meeting with folks from every different sector. They've been meeting with elected officials in municipalities. They've been talking with business leaders and really trying to figure out how we do this. So I would anticipate sometime before May 18th, they will come out with some guidance on how we're going to slowly phase in a reopening. It won't be all at once, that's for sure. But you may start to see where, you know, the regulations on hospitals for elective procedures and those things start to open up. Maybe some more, you know, parts of the service industry and retail, and then, you know, kind of just build on that while closely monitoring the cases. The key metric on this, Todd, and I've talked about it a few times here, we're doing more testing, so the raw numbers are going to go up. The more tests that we do, the more positive cases we're going to get. So there's a couple of key metrics to look at on the DPH dashboard. One, we're looking at testing, the positive testing percentage, which today we actually got some good news to that. I think we were at about 12%. For the major part of this week, it was right in the teens, kind of mid-teens. That's a good sign. At the high point, we were up around 30% of positive tests per day, which is frightening. And the hospitalization rates. Right now, there's about less than 1,000 people that are in ICUs across the Commonwealth of Massachusetts as we meet tonight. That's a positive sign. It's about 5% of the positive cases are actually hospitalized. So we're going to start to pay attention to those metrics as we reopen. The next big piece that the governor announced this week in consultation with the command center is in order for everybody to wear masks or face coverings while they're out in public. I know this is tough to get used to, and certainly Todd, you and I and the others that were doing the food drive today, And yesterday, we were all wearing our masks. You just need to take a break and go sit in the car and try and catch your breath. So it's going to be a little bit of a challenge getting used to it, but it's a good reason, right? The more that we wear masks as we're back out in public and back out in public places, the less of a chance we have, even if we're asymptomatic, to actually spread the virus. So it's an important order. I think, most people understand it. For those that are still reluctant to do it, I'm sure there's going to be some social pressure on them. There also is an enforcement piece, and I know cities and towns across the Commonwealth are trying to deal with how do you go out and become the mask police? Certainly not something that we've ever had to deal with before, but it was a smart order, I believe, from the governor and from the administration to order masks. It takes effect this Wednesday, May 6th. So if anybody out there ages 2 and up is out in public and social distancing is impossible, you have to be wearing some sort of face covering. And then finally, I just want to say that as we look forward now and we're starting to think more midterm and long term, I'm a member of the Senate Working Group on Economic Reinvestment and Recovery. We really have to understand that there were all sorts of kind of structural inequities to begin with when it comes to our economy and when it comes to our society, even here in Massachusetts. And as we look long term, we want to take the lessons from what we are learning in a pandemic and ask ourselves as legislators and leaders, are we doing everything we can to make sure that we are investing in the right place, to make sure that we are, ending inequality as much as we can, to make sure that working people are actually taken care of as well, to make sure that what existed prior to the pandemic and now we are seeing the ugly face of, that so many working people were just one pink slip away from poverty. How do we fix that? What can we do as legislators? What can we do as community leaders to make sure that we don't end up back in this situation? There are models that are telling us right now that up to a quarter of our population could be unemployed by this summer. 25% of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts could be unemployed. We haven't seen numbers like that, certainly in my lifetime, but in decades. That means so many people are out there hurting. That's why we have to come together in a food drive to collect food for our food pantries, because they can't keep up with the demand. That's why people like Madeline have to worry every single day about how the seniors in our community can deal with escalating, prices and can deal with having to pay their bills while, they're struggling on a fixed income, right? So these are the things that we're starting to really identify now as we're coming out of the surge of the public health crisis and realizing the adverse effect that it's had on so many people in our economy. So we'll be dealing with that going forward, but Attleboro always comes together. Attleboro always steps up in such a huge way. We saw that the last 2 days with the food drive. And Todd, I can't thank you enough, and former Councilor Parika and Councilor Delisio, Representative Hawkins, really the entire crew that just came together to make sure that we were taking care of people of our community. So I'm very, very proud to represent the city, and even during these difficult and challenging times, people are stepping up in a big way. So thank you, Todd.
Thank you, Senator Feeney. Oh, it's always informative. One thing that I was wondering if you could touch on again that you touched on last week was you had talked about the hospitals being safe and there being a concern that people weren't going to the hospital when they needed help. Can you reiterate that point?
Yeah, it's been a really important part of us what we've been trying to do to educate the public. The hospitals have been reporting to us that they haven't been seeing people come in for at the normal level for cardiac issues, for things like strokes, and other sicknesses that have nothing to do with COVID-19. And the fear is that folks are sitting at home with symptoms, again, not coronavirus related, but with symptoms of maybe a cardiac issue, and they're choosing not to go to the hospital because they don't feel safe going in and having to deal with, the possibility of being infected with coronavirus. Each one of the hospitals that reports on a daily basis to DPH also has to come up with a plan on what they do with the non-COVID infected units and staff. And they want us to be able to reiterate to people that it is safe. Please go. If you have any sort of symptoms at all, it is completely safe for you to go to the hospital and deal with what you have to deal with. These issues aren't going away because it's a pandemic. Yet the numbers of people going to the emergency rooms and into their doctors and into their primary cares has actually plummeted. So it's a matter of safety. I want people to know if you don't feel well, go to the hospital. It's safe to be there.
Thank you, Senator Feeney. Representative Hawkins, spent the whole weekend with you as well. Can you talk a little bit about the food drive and
Sure. Can I talk about your tan line on your face? Sorry.
Oh no, that's off limits.
I can't help myself. I say this every week, but you have a different set of officials from the city on every week, so it's worth saying every week. This is the 9th one of these in a row that you've done, and every week you've got a different lineup of city officials from different parts of the city, different elected officials, different leaders from the city to talk about what's going on. And I know in the State House, that was the first thing our job right now during this crisis, communicate with the public at large. So just to reassure them so they know what we're doing. It's not good news, but if they can talk to us and hear from us, the most important part of our job, and you stepped up to the plate 100 times over. I admire for what you've done, and the city's very lucky that you're doing this every week. The food drive, I see Jay came on. I'd like to let him talk about the food drive more than me, but I gotta say, from what I've seen, this is the second one we've done. We're probably going to do another one. What a good group of people to work with. We come from both political parties. We come from city. We come from state. And I got to say, these people are my friends. Utah, Jay, Heather, Paul Feeney, and it's pleasant. You're a good group to work with. This stuff it seems effortless. It doesn't even seem like work. And look at the turnout. Jay will probably tell you more about the turnout. But thank you for all of you that have worked on this. A couple of things in the State House. We're close, and probably it's more complicated for us than the Senate. We're working on a way that we can actually vote on legislation without going in the building, because obviously with social distancing, 160 of us can't be in the building. It's close. We're hoping that we can do it. If we pull this off, I think we may be, if not the first state, one of the first states in the country to be able to vote on legislation and have formal sessions. I think the technical end of it is fine. We would do it we can watch a live stream of the session, and we can vote by phone, which is easy. The rules is the hang up, because we're changing centuries worth of rules on how to debate and how to pass bills. We want to do that in a few days. So the fact that it's taking a little bit to get this figured out is very reasonable, but I'm hoping we can do that. And what we would use it on, the first guinea pig legislation that we would do, one of the fiscal problems with the state is that by changing the tax deadline to July 15, that puts the revenue in a different fiscal year. And it would be a bond bill that would allow us to do short-term borrowing to cover the needs of the state until that revenue comes in, which is kind of a no-brainer. Nobody's going to be against that, but it'll give us a chance to do a trial run with this new way of voting on legislation. I'm very hopeful that we'll be able to do that this week. The other thing that I think Senator Feeney and I are both doing a lot of in our office is people who have snags with their unemployment claim. And probably that's what I should be talking about. They got more unemployment claims in a week than they got in a year, and they're still getting them. So it's reasonable to understand that they've increased the staff for unemployment from 50 people to 850 people, but it's still reasonable to think that they stole some people from the RMV too. It's reasonable to think that they're still struggling with this. And the claims where a question was filled out wrong, or there's a piece of information that was entered wrong, or something goofy about the claim, those aren't the ones that are going to get done first. And that's where we can help. The ones that were filled out right, nice, clean, they go through, that's a reasonable timeline. But the other ones that had a problem are not. So we send them in the request in as a batch every day, and we follow up on them. It still takes time. It still probably takes a week, sometimes even 2 weeks, sometimes a few days. It depends on the question, how much they've got. But we send in a batch of inquiries every day. And what you can do if you're, and I'm starting to realize it's not just the 6 of you that are listening to me, but other people are listening. If you know somebody that's having trouble with it, send me an email to james.hawkins, HAWKINS, at MAHouse, like Mass House of Representatives, mahouse.gov. James.hawkins at mahouse.gov. And my cell phone, if you got a question, is 508-226-1436. So if you think something's gone wrong with your unemployment or the PUI, either one, please let us know. We can help with that.
Excellent. Camaraderie this weekend was incredible, and I appreciate all of your help.
Well, it's funny. There's like no egos there. Everybody's just there. We're friendly. We're just doing the job. And my particular thanks to the people who stayed in the basement sorting out that food. My God, that's a horrible job. And they ran out of room. It's in the stairway, the pile stacked high in the hallway, and they had to sit on their hands and knees and sort that out for the expiration date. Types of food, and it's a grueling job. And I'm very grateful there were some people that spent their day in the basement and never complained.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Next up, we have Alan Perry, Dr. Quinn, and Nurse O'Brien, the Attleboro Health Department. Welcome, guys. Alan Perry? Oh, I can. You're unmuted now. Sorry.
That's okay. Can you hear me now?
I've got you now. Yes. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting us.
Yeah. And so just generally, can you, since it's the first time you guys have been on, can you talk about what you've been seeing in the city?
As you know, we've been dealing with COVID-19 at least in the local area for a little over 2 months now. I think we in the health department began a little started getting a little concerned when we saw what was occurring next door. If you recall, I think the first positive cases in the area were actually over the line in Pawtucket, and sometimes when you think of Massachusetts as a whole, sometimes we have a tendency to forget that we are a border community. So it was this concern was already on our radar screen, prior to the Massachusetts statistics starting to come out.
All right. So this has been now going on for almost 2 months. Is there anything new that you've been seeing here in Attleboro? Are we at the plateau locally? The senator was saying that we're at the plateau for Massachusetts. What's Attleboro look like?
Attleboro is mirroring the state a little bit. I don't know if it's technically called a plateau, or at least here. I know our nurse, public health nurse, Jacqueline O'Brien, is on with you as well, and she may have more statistics. But over the past few days, we seem to see not an introduction of more cases. I think we had about 460 or so cases as of today, and that was the same number as yesterday. We've had a slight increase in deaths. I think we've had a total of 33 deaths in the city. One increase today. I think when you look at the state statistics, the peak, if you were to look at their statistics, if you'd call it that, or the high point we've probably seen in cases and deaths, was around the April 23rd date. With maybe some peaks and valleys, with a continued decline over the past few days anyway in deaths and case, I should say, in deaths, and in cases. So we may mirror that a little bit. About, if you were to look at the total number that we have in Attleboro, positives, again, the 464, that's roughly around 1% or slightly more than the of the population of the city who are confirmed positive. It's running about 1% at the state level as well. In the county, it's a little bit lower than that. It's something around like a 0.07%. So we're fairly similar in those rates with the state. So based on that, we're hoping we're seeing a plateau, but I don't know if we could tell you that today for sure.
All right. Similar question to, I think you heard, I asked Dave Sawyer about, sort of, I know it's premature to talk about anything definitively, but what are you envisioning for Attleboro opening back up? And what considerations are you making, or plans do you have in place so far?
Well, one thing that we're certainly doing here is we're working with the business and industry here in the city, mainly dealing with the matter at hand. If we're dealing with the enforcement of the governor's orders regarding essential and non-essential businesses. We're also working with the food establishments, certainly in other industry, in regards to the possibility of any positive cases or confirmed cases in establishments that we have to deal with in regards to quarantining. Also, the private population that tests positive, we're working on those right now. Those are our immediate concerns right now, and that's what we're concentrating our focus on. But what I do see is when the governor does release the stay-at-home order, so to speak, I think we definitely, and if there is some type of soft opening or some sort of a phased opening, we're preparing for that, because I think we will be having to work very closely with businesses and industry. Certainly, people who may work, in an industry where you have close contact, to really make sure that they're well advised, and that they know what they need to do, and that they know that they'll have support from this department to work with them on a case-by-case basis to help them out. And we would have some concerns as people start to transition now into I should say businesses transition into a soft opening, or even say a reopening. There would be some operating procedures, things like that. We would be concerned about. Want to make sure that they're ready to go ahead with that.
Perfect. And Dr. Quinn or Nurse O'Brien, do you guys have anything to add? Comments?
Jackie, you have anything?
No, I think, between what everybody has discussed previously and what Alan has brought up, I think it's hit most of the high points so far, unless there are specific questions.
Is it okay for us to stop socially distancing now and continue on like normal?
Wouldn't it be a nice dream? It's not one that we're going to have for a while, unfortunately. And just keep hoping for it. That's all I can tell you.
Perfect.
Yeah, I guess I could just add a few things with, a lot of the testing has been looking at viral particles of the RNA, and that's where they determine who's positive and who's not. I think something to look at in the future is what they're talking about is these antibody tests being developed, which is distinctly different. And in that situation, you're looking for who was without symptoms, asymptomatic, infected. So they never had the classic symptoms. So those studies are very interesting. They've done this in New York State, New York City, and Miami-Dade County, and they're finding that there is quite a higher rate of positive antibody tests coming back. It's nowhere close to the extent of the population you need to have the classic herd immunity, where when you have so many people infected, then basically they're not hopefully going to get infected again. But it's nowhere near that 60% that you hear about. It's more in the order of 14 to 20%. But what that's telling us is there's a lot of positive folks out there that just never had symptoms that will help prevent, hopefully, spikes in the future. But it's just something to be looking for when you hear the monotonous drone of the news in the background on the TV. If you see these antibody tests, probably something to look at or listen to when those come on.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I saw there was an MIT study in Boston that came back with a high 20s percentage for people in Boston with the antibody test. Quick question for you, Dr. Quinn. I know you don't have a crystal ball, but do you envision us opening back up prior to having a vaccine, or do you think this is will stay socially distanced in some form or another until that vaccine is available.
Well, I think what you're seeing nationwide, especially Michigan and some of the other states, is this cost-benefit analysis where, people are so concerned about not working, not having an income, that they're weighing that versus how can they roll out some sort of return to work, but keep the most vulnerable, namely the elderly, protected. So again, there is no crystal ball, but looking forward, I think you're going to see that balance where people are going to start getting back to, semi-essential jobs, if you want to call it that, or employing social distancing for restaurants, but then employing things like, don't visit the elderly relative as much as you hate to say that, because you just could potentially put them at risk. So it's going to be this kind of multiple variables that are playing into this, because people need to get back to work and have incomes. It just isn't sustaining to have everyone off. But people have got to be awfully careful, especially about infecting the elderly population, because they're the ones most, severely affected.
Yeah, and I think the numbers bear out to that too, what we've seen in terms of the people that are being the hardest hit in terms of deaths and everything like that. I mean, if you look at the statistics and what's going on in the nursing, in some of the long-term care facilities and things like that, I mean, those concerns certainly bear out. So we just, again, it's about really protecting our most vulnerable, our seniors, our people who are people who are immune compromised, people with multiple medical issues. Some of the things that I'm seeing as we're doing case investigation, the people that are really vulnerable, the people that are diabetics, people with a history of lung disease, heart disease, a combination they're the ones that are really being very hard hit. But at the same time, I have had perfectly young, healthy individuals, 20s, 30s, 40s, who have been so sick with no underlying health issues. It's inexplicable. I keep using this word. It's an insidious disease, and it's kind of like you roll the dice and you don't know really what you're going to end up with, depending on age. But again, definitely, the people with the multiple comorbidities and the people who are older, immune compromised, yes, they are vulnerable.
Excellent. Alan, Dr. Quinn, Nurse O'Brien, thank you so much for joining us, but more importantly, thanks for everything you're doing for the city during this time. I know you guys are incredibly busy. So thank you so much.
Yeah, I think everybody is. Thanks everybody for your hard work.
Yeah, same here. Thank you for inviting us on tonight to talk about it.
Yeah, thanks so much.
And thanks for not giving me a hard time about my sunburn. So have a good night, guys.
Yeah.
Next up, we have Catherine Fierick, the Economic Development Director here in Attleboro. Catherine, welcome. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for joining us 2 weeks in a row, actually. You were on last week and you gave me such anxiety because I didn't know who that mysterious phone number was on the call.
I'm not known for my technological skills. I apologize for that.
Yeah, I just kept seeing that phone number. I was like, oh, is this the Zoom bomb? Who is this? So thank you so much for joining again. And I know we have a lot of people on today, so thank you. And thank you, Madeline, for staying on for so long. What are we seeing here in the city as the person who's probably talking to local businesses the most? How are people faring? How are these businesses faring?
Well, I mean, having a small business has never been an easy endeavor. You all hear the statistics of 1 in 3 small businesses doesn't make it through the first however many years. It's never been an easy way to make a living. And right now it's much harder. Like much of America, small businesses don't have a tremendous amount of cash and reserves. So when this mandatory shutdown took place, There were immediate layoffs in many small businesses, and some of them are worrying about even keeping the doors open, being able to pay their rent, being able to pay their utilities. Certain industries are hit harder than others, but there aren't too many industries that haven't been affected in some way. Supply chains are starting to unravel now. Being able to get certain goods and supplies that are needed, it's becoming more difficult, more challenging. So this is a widespread economic crisis that we're dealing with, on the heels of, and of course, secondary to the public health crisis that of course you can't put a dollar figure on grandparents or parents' lives. So it comes second to that, but it's causing a lot of anxiety throughout the United States right now and throughout the world.
Perfect. What have you found is available for these small businesses, and if they need help, who do they reach out to?
Well, first and foremost, answering the second question first, it's a time when landlords and creditors are expecting calls. They're expecting to be asked for terms to be modified or extended. And I highly, highly recommend that anybody who finds themselves short on cash do that. Make those conversations. They're difficult, but they could be the difference between your business surviving in the long run and your business having to shut down. When it comes to resources, a lot of the talk has been at the federal level. A lot of the talk has been regarding the Paycheck Protection Program, the economic injury disaster loans. Each of these includes a forgivable component or a grant of some sort. And I do highly encourage businesses to look at those programs through the SBA. But there are other resources available at the state level and even here locally in Attleboro. I've been advising people to look at LISC Boston, LISC. They've been partnering with various larger corporations, Citibank, Verizon, and they've had a couple of tranches so far of small business loans of up to $10,000. The most recent one closed last week, but I try to post them on Facebook whenever I see that there's another round, the city's Facebook page. Another good source that ran out immediately was the Massachusetts Growth Capital Corporation had a separate fund set aside. Hopefully we'll see that the state reinvigorate those funds. And locally, this is kind of a state program as well. Through Mass Development, we were able to get $30,000 to distribute as pure grants to small businesses located in downtown Attleboro. We've also put in an application with the Massachusetts Office of the Attorney General, who opened a round of funding of up to $50,000 for municipalities. And again, those would be straight pass-through grants to small businesses. So even in Attleboro, we're working with our partners at the state, federal level, trying to get those funds out. The last resource that I'll mention is we did receive an additional allocation of CDBG funds through the CARES Act. And I've been working with my colleague, Dorothy Brissett, our community development director. And we've set up a small business emergency grant program through CDBG as well for qualifying businesses. Typically, either the business owner or most of the staff have to be low to moderate income. There are other qualifications, but we have a couple of grant programs already in the works, and we're really trying to get money out quickly. And whenever I see anything, I pounce on it, because I know that these days loans aren't something that a lot of small businesses are considering because they have no certain revenues. They're looking for grant funding. That's the times that we live in. A lot of businesses are looking at just ways to plug the gaps here to get through until these mandated closures end and they're able to resume normal operations, or the new normal operations.
Sure. Can individual businesses reach out to you? Can they find your email on the Attleboro website, the city website?
Yeah, my email's on that Attleboro city website, and anytime they want to, they can reach out to me. My name, Catherine Fierick at cityofattleboro.us. I'm happy to answer any questions that businesses have. I'm happy to point them towards any resources that might benefit them. It's changing by the day. As the need grows, philanthropists, organizations, and governments have all stepped up to try to address it. So anybody who has any questions is more than welcome to contact me. My door's always open.
Outstanding. Thank you, Catherine. Thank you for the work you do. One last question. Have you seen any positive stories come out of this? Is there any, I know there's a lot of doom and gloom, but has there been anything positive you've seen over the last couple months?
Well, probably the most positive thing that I have seen so far has been really a desire on the part of developers to keep going. Interest has not slowed in some of our downtown properties. Offers have been made since this crisis began on certain buildings within our downtown. No deals have taken place, but developers are still targeting properties within our city for redevelopment. They're still targeting acquisitions and construction projects. So it's not the end of the world. There are some individuals who are absolutely willing to invest in this economy. So I'd say that is the biggest bright spot that we have.
Outstanding. Thank you, Catherine, and thank you for all of your hard work. And next up, we have Madeline McNeely from the Council on Aging. Madeline, thank you so much for waiting. I know it's a long call, but you're one of my favorite people in the city. How is everything going?
It's been extremely interesting watching this program every week. There's a wealth of experience and knowledge, and it's great to listen to each one of the individuals share that expertise. As far as the Council on Aging goes, primarily tonight, I'd like to just make sure that seniors are aware that although the majority of us are working remotely, that there is staff in the center every day. We are retrieving calls and attempting to answer them in a timely fashion. I would like to say the same day, but unfortunately, when we're dealing with a crisis call, that takes precedence over some of the others. We have had some really good safety net programs in place. We've found that out through this experience. About 4 years ago, we started a grant program with the Greater Boston Food Bank. And that actually year to date, that has provided over 200,000 pounds of free to low income seniors. And Jim Hawkins can attest to that. He goes every month to help unload the food truck and to assist with, as a volunteer, to assist with the delivery. So every month we deliver 2,800 pounds of free food and have been doing that, as I mentioned, for over close to 4 years. So a lot of our low income seniors have a good daily supply of those state foods. And so again, we found that that's been a real true safety net in this time. The other, and it may sound like it's a very simple program, but we have a very active TR program, telephone reassurance. And it's a safety net. It's primarily for those people that are alone, isolated, have mental health problems with anxiety. Every year we do about 1,500 of those calls, and we've been ramping those up through this period to those people that we know are at greater risk. We are in the process of developing a fact sheet, which I hope will get out this week. So city councilors, that will be distributed through all the food banks, through all the meals that are being provided, and it will have all of the resources that we've been queried about or that we know that people will need. So things like, where do I get food assistance? Well, most of you that have been talking are aware that the food banks have changed their policies and procedures. So traditionally there were 3 food pantry deliveries available through the Hebron Food Pantry on Stanford Street. Well, they consolidated that to 2. And as you know, it's a drive-through or a walk-through now. And so there have been simple changes that can have a real impact on people being able to get access to their and address their needs. We're looking daily. I get so many emails. I feel like I'm in tune with all of you folks, with all the communications that are coming in, both from the federal government, our state, and from our local government. And a lot of those are very impactful for our seniors. So some highlights, for example, would be the governor's mandate recently on foreclosures and evictions, which I had hoped that maybe Senator Feeney at another time could talk a little bit more about to the public. Those are time sensitive. Those are only available to the public while the state of emergency exists. So there's a lot of caveats with that. There have been a ton of changes with Medicare, and those are really difficult to interpret for the seniors. So we do have the SHINE program personnel available to address any of those issues on a one-to-one basis. And the same with outreach. An outreach worker or a crisis manager will return a call. So for tonight, for the purpose of tonight, I would say that if anyone needs to reach the Council on Aging, to call me at 774-203-1900. All my calls are fielded to the appropriate departments to return a call. And as I mentioned,
Can you say that number one more time?
774-203-1900.
Perfect.
I do also, there are two other things that I just wanted to mention. Transportation. If people are looking for Dial-A-Ride or GATRA, the handicap passes, there is a mechanism for them to mail their checks in to us, and we will return those via mail to them. That will all be in the fact sheet. We are getting calls for grocery deliveries. That again will be spelled out very clearly in the fact sheet, which I hope to get out to people very soon. We are also getting a lot of calls from people with escalating mental health issues. As you can imagine, there are people now that, like all of us, are getting very anxious for this to end or to hear something negative about the end and what it means for them. And we are doing our best to address those issues, mainly through a friendly phone call, reassuring we're there, that we care. What else can you?
Yeah, and that's tough. One of the things that we've stressed week after week is this really is sort of an unprecedented time, and I know people may have been able to get by in the past, but now they can't. And the one thing I want to stress is that if somebody needs help, don't hesitate to reach out to help. Reach out for help. Madeline gave her number, but there was somebody last night that was talking about they didn't get their unemployment check, and they didn't know where to go for food. And if somebody's in need of help, reach out to anybody, just ask for help and we can direct you in the right direction. Madeline obviously is the ideal person to reach out to, but find any of us and we're all willing to help. One of my other questions, Madeline, was about telemedicine, and I was wondering how that's been going with the seniors now.
Well, that's an area that you and I briefly discussed because, as you know, Medicare now has improved telemedicine as a billable service. And so more and more providers, for various reasons, are reaching out to attempt to reach their patients with telemedicine. And one of the areas that I'm looking for more information from seniors, are they participating in telemedicine? And if not, why not? What are the obstacles and how can we help? I have been talking with a contact that I have previously obtained grant funds from Verizon, and we're hoping to look at maybe getting some telemedicine, some maybe iPads or smartphones or some mechanisms that we can help give those to the seniors that we know really need it, but don't have those. Many of our low-income seniors are on Lifeline phones, which have limited minutes. And very often they just don't have either the access for those additional minutes or the ability to do that telemedicine with the platforms that are required. So that's a whole new field for me. As I mentioned to you, I'm really trying to learn more as I ask questions, as I'm talking to people about it. We don't know whether it's actually an obstacle, but my fear is that it may be. And I also would like to add that we have a critical safety net program called the File of Life. And many of your seniors are very familiar with it, but it's a very simple health history that's attached in a red envelope to your refrigerator. And when the paramedics will come to your house, that's the first thing they look for. They look for that because it eliminates them needing to go through all that information, time-consuming information. It gives you a list of medications, who your physician is, who your emergency contacts may be. So that's something that we can offer free, and anyone can call me and I'll pop one in the mail.
Perfect. That's great. And what about just general communications? Are you looking for volunteers to help? And like, how are seniors staying in touch and communicating and just keeping from going crazy sitting at home during this pandemic?
Well, we've been very fortunate. The majority of the Attleboro housing and many of the large housing complex have service coordinators. So they're our link to that group of people. So they communicate with us if there is something urgent that needs to be dealt with, if they have a concern about an elder that may be in need of some more services. We do receive phone calls daily. We probably have about 50 to 100 on a weekly basis, people calling us with questions, family members calling. There's a large group of people that were sustained with adult day health centers. And we have 4 in the city of Attleboro that are servicing our clients. Those people are now home. Those people are being taken care of by family members. That's another area that I have a major concern in. Burnout, the inability to sustain that kind of caregiving. Those are all issues, as Senator Feeney mentioned, that are challenges that we are, if we're not facing them now, I anticipate they will be issues in the near future.
Excellent. Does anybody else have questions for Madeline? All right, Madeline, thank you so much for everything you do. It's certainly challenging, and we all appreciate it, and especially recognize that the seniors are some of the hardest hit group with this. So thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And last but not least, my partner in crime, Councilor Delicio. Welcome. And do you want to talk about the food drive we spent all weekend together in the sun? You don't look
yeah,
really
but first of all, I have to say to Madeline, I know I owe you a phone call. I haven't forgotten. We're just so lucky to have Madeline in the city. The job and the work that you do is absolutely unbelievable. So Madeline, thank you for everything that you do. Todd, yeah, certainly partner in crime. I've had more of my fill of you this weekend, young man. Just kidding. No, we had a great weekend. We did our second drive-through food drive this weekend. And I'll tell you, so we shortened it from 4 hours to 3 hours Saturday, Sunday. And at the end of the day, yesterday, we had already had as much food in 3 hours as we had all of 8 hours. And, you know, there's a lot of people that really came together to make this happen. You know, Todd, Heather Parika, Senator Feeney, our good friend State Hawk, and that's his new name at this point because we were doing a lot of Facebook Lives, and instead of State Rep Jim Hawkins, I said State Hawk. So that's how as he's now known. But it was really amazing. You know, the day started yesterday morning with a lady who came up and said, you know what? I felt really bad because I couldn't contribute last time because all I had in my checking account was $5. She had $5 in her checking account for the last 3 weeks. It wasn't until her Social Security hit that she was able to donate. But the first thing she wanted to do was donate. And there's so many people that are in the situation that they've never imagined they'd be in. You know, whether it's our seniors, whether it's, you know, the young families starting out, whoever, we're all impacted by this. So it was great to hear our friends in the health department talk about really where we're at this point. And to see the generosity of this community come together. We had people who would come in and would say, hey, I can't believe all this stuff. Thank you so much. And then say, we're in a position to do it. We're both working and we know that people need it more than we do. We, I think, Todd, it's safe to say that we probably doubled what we did at the beginning of the month. And I think we've all decided we're going to do this again the first weekend in June. To have the community come together continuously the way it has. Attleboro is at its best when we come together. We've said it a million times. And really, the amount of people we're going to be able to help, it's overwhelming. There's so many people who need help. And, you know, Todd, you've said this a million times, and I agree. If you're in a situation where you need help, ask. Attleboro is so willing and able to help. All you need to do is ask. You know, I thought it was great that so many of us have put out our personal cell phones or emails. You know, my cell phone's 508-838-7328. Please, you know, don't be afraid to reach out to any one of us. We're all in this together. We're all going to get through this together. So, you know, Todd, the job that this committee's done is really amazing. We had so many volunteers. We had the Tellier family. We had my wife, Amy, and my son, Ryan. We had Firefly Theater Company. We had Brenda Zarek, Richard, and her son, Zach. We had, obviously, Heather was there, driving force and all this. There's so many volunteers that came all weekend to be able to help. People that came with toilet paper. Toilet paper is such a commodity right now, in where they could be selling it on eBay or Amazon, you know, for $100 a roll. They donated it, and it was just really overwhelming to see this community continue to come together. This is the first time we've all been through this, and truly, 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 we're all in this together. You know, so thank you, Todd, for the opportunity to come in and talk about this tonight. And really, it's one Attleboro, and we're all in this together.
Jay, thank you so much for everything you've done. And it really was humbling to see everybody just come out, and it's like the whole city wants to help out in any way they can. So it really is humbling.
Todd, people are asking already, like, when are we doing it again? You know, I had a lady call us today, Todd, when we were down there, and she said, you know, Counselor, I want to come down, I want to help, but, you know, I'm in a situation where I can't drive, but I want to make a donation. I have $20 left in my checking account. I want to bring it, and I want to send it to Hebron Food Pantry. Like, that's where we're at. That's where the heart of this community is. You know, Todd, you and I talked a lot about the senior who came in last time we did this, and she said, I have a box of cereal, that's all I have. And we're like, oh, you have, that's great. And we're like, thank you. Well, you know, we really appreciate it. She drove off. We all looked at each other and we said, oh my goodness, that was literally all she had. And she wanted to give it to help somebody else out. That's where the heart of this community is. And, you know, Attleboro's at our best when we come together.
Absolutely. All right, so we went a little bit over today. That's all we have. Does anybody have anything else that they want to add?
Todd, I'll just say what you're doing here is amazing. Your outreach and your leadership in a time where this city needs leadership, you're doing a great, great job. So thank you for all you do, sir.
Thank you. It's a collective effort. We're all working together. The city's, all the elected officials are doing their part. It's really incredible. So thank you for everybody. Anything else? We'll close it out. Thank you so much, everybody. We'll see you next